I am Joel McLeod.
And I'm Roland Tanner.
And welcome to the penultimate episode of the 905er for 2021. And for this illustrious occasion, we wanted to follow up on an earlier story we did in the pandemic. Well, sort of. Those of us in the 905, as well as in Ontario at large, are very familiar with the struggles of Peel region to tame COVID-19. At the height of the pandemic, Peel seemed to be the textbook worst-case scenario for COVID-19, constantly racked with high case counts and short on resources to tackle the problem. It appeared that a large number of cases were in racialized communities who were predominantly employed in the logistics and warehousing industries, and that we had become so dependent on to get us through this crisis. Now, back in January, prior to vaccines being available, we spoke with Dr. Amanpreet Brar, who is using multicultural media in Peel to reach out to the various communities that were affected by COVID-19 the most to educate them on the effects of the disease. Now, we had wanted to follow up on this story and see what the situation was like in Peel today, and we were very pleased to hear that this is very much a good news story. Peel region has turned itself around from being an epicenter of infections to being one of the highest rates of vaccinations in not just Ontario and not just the 905, but the entire country. Peel has 86% of its residents, 12 years of age and older, fully vaccinated, with 90% of that same population having at least one dose. One of the biggest contributing factors to this milestone is the hard work of community groups to reach out to the various ethnicities that make up Peel to educate and mobilize them into achieving this accomplishment. Groups like the South Asian COVID-19 Task Force, the Latin American COVID-19 Task Force, the Black Health Task Force, and the Canadian Muslim COVID-19 Task Force. Today we're joined by Urz Heer of the Canadian Muslim COVID-19 Task Force. Urz is a well-known figure in Peel region. She is a former journalist for local Rogers TV and is an active community advocate. She is a member of the task force, and we reached out to them to invite her on for her to share about her group and what they did, as well as the others that I mentioned before, to help mobilize their various communities to help turn the tide on COVID-19 in Peel region. As well, we wanted to learn what lessons we can take away from this experience to help us vaccinate the remaining age groups of the region, as well as to look into what we have to deal with with the Omicron variant going forward. Now, as always, we want to help keep telling stories like this one, but we need your help to do it. Please consider supporting us on Patreon for only $7 per month. Or if you want to do it for a one-time fee, please look at our Buy Me a Coffee page. Every little bit helps, keeps us going, and links to both sites are on our show notes. Okay, I would like to welcome to the podcast for the first time Urz Heer from the Canadian Muslim COVID-19 Task Force. That's a mouthful of a name, but thank you, Urz, for coming on. And we've been excited to do this episode just because it's a great follow-up to a previous episode that we did on the podcast on Peel region and how the population was dealing with COVID-19, and especially trying to encourage the various ethnic communities in Peel to basically ultimately get vaccinated. And I'm going to throw it over to you, Urz, and you can tell us, can just give us a bit of background on the task force and how that came to be, and the work that you've been doing since the start of this pandemic.
Okay. So thank you, first of all, for having me on and allowing me to share our story. The Canadian Muslim COVID Task Force had actually started before the lockdowns begun. So the Sunday before that Monday lockdown announcement, members of the Muslim physician community, some faith leaders, and community partners got together and said, we have a problem. This COVID pandemic is real and it's going to hit us. And we are a community which gathers frequently for prayers, and, just foreseeing the potential spread that our community could have been responsible for was a big concern. Dr. Hashim Khan was he's the brainchild and one of the co-founders the lead person who actually began this initiative, he said, we need to be able to connect with all of the faith communities across the country and let them know that we are concerned and we want to help mitigate any COVID spread that could potentially happen. I'm not sure if you know, but when we pray at the mosque, we're usually shoulder to shoulder, standing right very close to each other, almost touching each other. Just it's in very close proximity, and so just foreseeing, if somebody had that, the spread could potentially be out of control. So we actually had, come up with various ideas on how we would communicate information right from the get-go. We came up with literature and pamphlets on how to space apart, and, wearing masks, and, all of that was sort of a collaborative, strategy, which included community partners, public health, government, etc. Having these social media campaigns, having town halls to talk about it with physicians, with scholars, because a lot of our community really relies on the words of a scholar. And what does a scholar say? I know it's used very loosely, the fatwa, but informally, like, what is the ruling on can you close the mosques down in this situation? Who would be at would it be a punishable sin if you missed a Friday prayer, which is equivalent to Sunday church? So there were a lot of things that we had to take into consideration and really, hit that, send that message home with the community. The COVID task force, held town halls in various languages, with various superstars in the community, with physicians and doctors.
What was the reaction from the community like when you and I presume imams and other noteworthy people in the community would stop and said, we have to change what we're used to in a very drastic way? What was the reception to the layperson?
Change is never easy for anyone, regardless of what background and culture you come from. And so this was definitely something that required people to change. And, we did have resistance, and, just getting our name across and getting what, the information that we were trying to share. First of all, to build that credibility, we needed to latch onto and have connected with our organization very prominent scholars, faith leaders. For example, Imam Hamid Salimi and Dr. Rafat Mohammed. These are well-known names. The imams that were part of the Canadian Council of Imams, which represented, from coast to coast, imams across the country. There was hesitancy, but when people heard names that were popular and well-known and credible, they started paying attention. Even getting our name out there, the Muslim COVID task force, people were like, who are you? Why should we listen to you? We don't know you, type of thing. And, we really had to build our credibility. And that was just through the work that we were doing. We would share information. As outreach lead, my job was to ensure that we were connecting with, the mosques across the country, organizations, and connect, with the local health authorities in each area, in languages as well. I mean, when we were in, reaching into Quebec, we had to make sure we had, French-speaking people who were able to convey that information and communicate, and also connect with, those who needed to be connected to. I think the biggest authority, which also helped us, was the fact that Mecca, Saudi Arabia, had shut down. So while it was hard for us to convince mosques to shut down here, when Mecca shut down, that actually helped us in our efforts to.
I,
Um,
I did not know that. I did not know that Mecca had
Mecca had never
effectively
shut down
closed.
in 1400 and almost
Wow.
1500 years, and this was the first time. It was a big shock. It actually was quite emotional for many people to just like think how could Mecca shut down. I think they only had the workers that were in there doing caretaking. I think they were the only ones that were in there, but access was closed to everyone. So if Mecca could shut down, we could shut down our mosques here too.
This, it's just thinking that. Well, first of all, let's talk about the really good news piece of this story, which is that the Peel, which many of our listeners will know, was particularly hard hit by COVID-19, in large part because of immigrant populations who are working in those kind of jobs where you have to go to work, where you don't get paid sick days, where you all those kind of problems. But despite all that, is now pretty much leading Canada, certainly leading Ontario in terms of vaccine uptake, and with 90% vaccination of at least one dose, which is considerably ahead of the population as a whole. I mean, do you think that's basically down to the kind of communication that you and your organization have been doing, and the kind of openness within the communities to listening to the advice of respected people and educated people, either within the medical community or within the faith community?
Um, Definitely. We had worked hard in Peel, and actually, a lot of our members are from Peel. We did build a team of people from across the country, but the majority of us actually were from the Peel area, Peel or GTA. And so it was a little bit easier for us to focus a little bit more at home. Engaging with Dr. Lawrence Lowe and engaging with the mayor, and actually the COVID Muslim task force helped create the South Asian COVID task force, and so we have Hindu and Sikh because Dr. Hashem says to Dr. Raj Grewal, like, we have a problem in Peel. We need to like fix this situation, and so let's like mobilize the South Asian community. Now, Muslims are not just South Asians. We're Arabs, we're Chinese, we're Russians and Turks, and et cetera, et cetera. So, there is no real one language, culture, or background for Muslims, but there are many South Asian Muslims. So we had a role to play within the South Asian Task Force, but, mobilizing the South Asian Task Force, and I believe it was around the time of Diwali, that the information was conveyed, and we had to we had helped them get started, and they started with their vaccination clinic, and it's a collaborative effort, sorry. And there's you need public health, you need government, you need your local mayor, and our Brampton mayor and Mississauga mayor, and they worked very hard to really keep people at home, encourage people to get vaccinated, from town halls to press conferences to having teletown halls. A lot of work was done by everyone at every level in order to get people vaccinated. We were a hot spot. We had actually had the first mosque, the Brampton Islamic Center, be a vaccine clinic. And in doing so, we were able to, that was in one of the hotspot areas. But we did that during Ramadan, and people fast during Ramadan. And some people were concerned about, is this, getting a vaccine going to break my fast? We don't want to break our fast. People are very particular and dedicated to their faith. They don't want to do anything that would jeopardize. And we had faith leaders actually give sermons on the fact that vaccines are permissible and people can take a vaccine and it will not break your fast. We made phone calls to people from the masjid community. We went to the doors and we sent text messages. We spoke in people's languages. It was one of those, leave no stone, unturned.
On that note, you clearly you were working closely with Peel Regional Health and the local municipality. Like, did you get any help from the provincial government at this time to mobilize? I mean, once the vaccines became real and they were starting to filter out into the communities as a large, was there any outreach from the Ministry of Health to coordinate a communication strategy to not just your community, but as you said, the South Asian community? I also want to touch upon there's also a Latin American COVID-19 task force and the Black Health task force that were also focusing on minority communities in the region. Mm-hmm. Was there any coordination on that part to say, okay, how do we get people to buy in, stand in the line, get the needle, anything of that nature?
Not from what I know of. I know that the region of Peel did, reach out, and they made a lot of effort to engage with various stakeholders, including the Muslim COVID task force. So a lot of effort on the provincial side, although I do know that one of the MPs in Peel did hold, every time there was an announcement made on lockdown or easing up, there was a Zoom call meeting where, they shared information that the province had released. And so that was kind of reiterated and spoken in, rather it was addressed with specifically to the Muslim community and how that would impact them. And the COVID task force was part of those calls.
And that was certainly something we heard from our guest, and Joel, I'm blanking on the name.
Dr. Brar.
Dr. Brar, that's right. Who was kind of saying, that there was, ironically, that there's actually some fairly well-established media organizations that reach out into various faith and ethnic communities that could have been used by the province as a way to communicate with those sectors, but she was saying, this wasn't happening in that stage.
I think when the pandemic began, like nobody knew really like how to deal with it, so everyone was just trying to make sense of what they thought would be a good strategy, and it was, I think it was just an uncoordinated bit of a mess in the beginning, and everyone, and I'm not blaming anyone, but I think that for some reason we weren't able to be as effective as we could have been. Like, my opinion is, why didn't we lock down the airports right from the get-go? And
great question. Yeah,
that would have saved us a lot. But hindsight is 2020. So,
yeah. And it strikes me that there's this, like I say, a good news story that came out of something horrific, and communities that are being hit disproportionately by the impact of the virus before the vaccine was available. And then comparisons are sort of difficult, but when we look at the people, those sectors of society that are most resistant to vaccination now, I can't help but think that it's predominantly a white phenomenon, and from what I'm judging from the TV and everything, and what a peculiar state of affairs this is, that the people who are kind of anti-science, who refuse to listen to voices of authority, who are kind of hell-bent on just not taking this vaccine, are from the most privileged sectors of society. I don't know what I'm asking there, but it's an interesting phenomenon. I just wondered if you had any thoughts about it.
Well, I think I'm not quite understanding the question, but I think I can just maybe just make a comment that there was a lot of misinformation out there, and a lot of misinformation was being spread on WhatsApp and through various social media channels. Don't take the vaccine. It's gonna, this is gonna happen. That's gonna happen. Some funny videos of people starting off speaking English and ending up, speaking Chinese once you take the vaccine. Just ridiculous misinformation out there, and so it really created a lot of confusion, and people were hesitant. And the Muslim community, as well. But the one good thing that also came out of, and I have to say, again, Saudi Arabia showed leadership in this case, where they said, if you're not vaccinated, you're not coming to perform this pilgrimage. You cannot come into the country and perform pilgrimage. Well, what did that do? It actually probably pushed people who were kind of on the fence about it. They're like, well, you know what? We're going to go and get that vaccine.
Well, on that note, we're looking at the numbers are as Roland stated before, are quite impressive. 90% of Peel ages 12 years and older have at least one dose. 86% of the same demographic are fully vaccinated. And a big chunk of that is because of your organization, as well as the others that I mentioned previously, the South Asian, Latin American, and Black Health Task Forces. I'm wondering your insight into Peel, and what do you think of Peel embracing vaccines? What do you think it says about Peel region when there are still other sectors of the province that are still very hesitant to take this vaccine, yet we see in Peel an enthusiasm to really get the vaccine?
So I think we had some really good campaigns. The This Is Our Shot campaign, Get Your Tika. Tika means injection. A lot of positive campaigning was done during the vaccine kickoffs, and having leaders show that, their arm as they were getting their vaccination. Like, there was a big buzz around, and also I think there was also concern that the vaccines would run out. So I think that also, just sort of led people to getting their vaccine at their first opportunity that they could. And it was almost like a fight towards getting the vaccine. Now, there were anti-vaxxers as well, but I think this buzz, the many campaigns that were taking place, with the vaccine, and the hashtags, and people seeing their leaders, their community leaders, and their faith leaders, and getting the vaccine. I think those were very encouraging to others, and it set an example for people to get their vaccine. I think having faith communities be a vaccine clinic, if it was first the mosque, then the Gurdwara, Dixie Gurdwara, you've had the Hindu temples. These were all positive things that took place and had to take place. Churches as well. People and organizations all stepped up, wanting to offer their space, wanting to help mitigate this pandemic and keep people safe. I think all of these things, collaboratively helped move Peel into a high positively vaccinated statistic. And, I have to say that, again, the mayors, really stepped up to the plate, and really, their messaging was really on point, having Dr. Lowe speak, address any issues, foresee potential spread at various times of the year. So whether it was the end of Ramadan, which is Eid, whether it was Easter or Christmas, there was always, or Thanksgivings, there was always the messaging around, don't forget, we are in a pandemic, so be safe, and if we're limited to 5 people or your household, then that's what it is. And I think also the Brampton community is very tight knit. People talk to each other. People, gather and they share information. And whereas I guess in other parts of Canada where houses are a little further apart and people don't talk to each other as much, here you have people that do talk to each other, and that communication, oh, did you get yours? I got mine. Oh, mine's next week. So like people are, communicating and collaborating and really encouraging each other to, like, let's, get on it. Don't wait. We need to do this.
It's almost it's an example of what strong community ties can do to benefit a community, isn't it? I mean, it seems like, and actually, I mean, just tying in, I mean, I've been fortunate enough to go to Halton Mosque a few times for particular events, and my experience as obviously a non-Muslim was first the most fantastic, generous welcome that I received there every time I was there.
I'm so happy to hear.
Yeah, well, and I'm sure every mosque in Ontario and indeed Canada would be the same. But also that I felt almost, and the sad irony for those people who are fearful or hostile of other religions is that it seemed like an old fashioned in like kind of, this is what Christian communities maybe in North America were like 50 years ago, and that there were very close social ties where now many people don't go to church, and whatever. I'm not criticizing or endorsing or any of that, other than
but
that.
That's what church communities used to be, right? Like they were a social, a place where people could gather. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that as I say, old-fashioned isn't really the right word I want to use, but that very healthy kind of strong community links that you see in places like Brampton is something that has been lost in other parts of Ontario, and it's regrettable, and it's maybe informing that kind of fractured distrust of educated people and things like that we're seeing with the anti-vax movement and things like that we don't get in the Muslim community or the Hindu community. It appears, or in a much smaller degree. It's a really interesting thing that it says about sort of modern society, maybe.
Yeah, definitely. I really feel like Peel is a place where people can be really like back to basics, like just very, traditional, visit each other's homes. You don't have to call in advance. And, once the pandemic hit, I think, that affected a lot of people, and it really pained a lot of people to not be able to just drop into their neighbor's house or not drop into their family or hang out with their friends. I think, people are very, wanting to, we're social beings. And so it's something that I'm proud that we belong to a community that is very closely connected to each other. And, it's a double-edged sword, because that was also our detriment during the early days of COVID, and people, having to stay safe. A lot of the homes in Peel are multi-generational homes. And so families, brothers and their kids and mothers, parents, and children, you could have 15 to 20 people in one home in Brampton, but that's just how it is in other parts of the world.
Those ties that the community has. What factor do you think that played into overcoming the vaccine hesitancy that we're still seeing in large parts of the country? Because 90% dosed in Peel is an impressive number, and you got to think that somehow you managed to overcome a lot of that vaccine hesitancy that we're still seeing across the province. And I'm wondering, is there something with those community ties that I trust my neighbor, and if my neighbor got it, that it's good enough for him or her, it's good enough for me?
Pretty much, I would say. And again, like I said, if like there's a household of 12 or 15 people, they're all getting the vaccine. And if there's some hesitancy, maybe one or two people in that family might not get it, but then they'll eventually come under pressure because everyone else got it. And yes, talking to neighbors who got the vaccine, also helps. So like I said, I think the communicating, the talking, the network that were built, and I think all of that helped in really getting people out there and getting vaccinated. Yeah, and also when they hear messaging on ethnic media, like I think that helps too because people are very connected based on their language.
Well, I see we're coming up on our half hour time limit here, and I just have one last question to ask. And I just now that the vaccine is now being expanded into children, what are the plans for the task force to reach out to encourage the younger generation to get vaccinated?
Yep. So we're actually still in discussions on that. Possibly, again, another vaccine clinic at the mosque for children to get vaccinated. So that's in the works. I don't want to say too much because I don't know where it's going to be where it's going to be approved. But yes, definitely. If we were able to mobilize for adults to get vaccinated, we are going to be involved in helping to get children vaccinated as well.
Well, that's it for me. Roland, do you have any other questions to ask?
I just think it's an outstanding story of a community success and communities with different cultural and religious backgrounds working together to achieve something really notable that is saving lives and beating this horrible disease. So it's really something that I think some other communities around Ontario and around Canada and maybe even around the world could learn from. So congratulations to you and everybody in Brampton and Peel for what you've achieved. I think it's really impressive and nice to have a kind of in the midst of all the hardship and difficulties of COVID to see something like that having a really positive effect is great. So
and I have to say one more thing. I know we're speaking on the Muslim COVID task force, but we really did collaborate with community partners. So, the South Asian Task Force, the Hindu and Sikh community, the Punjabi Community Health Services, our local shelters. Like we made sure that, this wasn't just one community, but all of us working together to help save our community from any further spread of COVID.
Well, thank you very much for all the work.
Thank you.
That's it for this episode of the 905er. Thank you for listening. As always, you can send us your feedback, thoughts, and concerns or ideas for future episodes to our email, info@905er.ca. We'd love to hear from you. You can help us keep the 905er going by financially supporting us through Patreon as well as PayPal. Visit us at 905er.ca and click on the support tab. As well, links are in the show notes for your convenience. Lastly, you can find us on social media. Search for _905er on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So long for now. See you next time.
looking to make the most out of this life and optimize your personal wellness? Then check out the Natural Man Podcast. Join me, host Mike C., as we explore all areas of human wellness, physical, mental, and emotional. Learn strategies to optimize your own well-being and be in the driver's seat of your own health. Remember, your doctor works for you. Learn biohacks, neurohacks, ways to improve sleep, and ways to optimize your body and your mind. Check us out on Apple, Spotify, the Fountain app, and at naturalmanpodcast.com.